birthday on this wonderful occasion of our 200th anniversary. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Does the gentleman have any unanimous consent requests?
I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on the subject of this special order.
Without objection. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 6, 2015, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is supposed to be our last day in formal session or actual session of the year. That maybe some come up. I always worry about unanimous consent requests when nobody is here, but I know the administration likes to brag that it's been a good year for enforcing the border, but this story from Brooks Singman says the number of unaccompanied children crossing into the U.S. from Mexico nearly doubled this year. Anyway, that from Border Patrol figures that hopefully will get the Trump administration moving as quickly as they indicate they intend to. And it's worth noting that this story came out from The Hill, Mark Hinch, that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind 9/11, says that in his view, immigration into the United States is al-Qaeda's deadliest weapon against the United States. Anyway, that's what he has apparently indicated. A witness said from his perspective, the long war for Islamic domination wasn't going to be won in the streets with bombs and bullets and bloodshed. No, it would be won in the minds of the American people. And goes on to, this is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's thinking, and thank God, literally thank God that President Obama has not released the mastermind as he has so many others who contributed to the deaths of Americans. But Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the 9/11 mastermind, said that the terror attacks were good, but the practical way to defeat America is through immigration and by outbreeding non-Muslims. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed said jihadi-minded brothers would immigrate into the United States, taking advantage of the welfare system to support themselves while they spread their jihadi message. They will wrap themselves in America's rights and laws for protection, ratchet up acceptance of Sharia law, and then, only when they were strong enough, rise up and violently impose Sharia from within. He said the brothers would relentlessly continue their attacks, and the American people eventually would become so tired, so frightened, and so weary of war that they would just want it to end. And according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, that is when radical Islam, Sharia law, would take over for the United States, and the Constitution of the United States would no longer have meaning here. Anyway, rather interesting when we find out exactly what the enemies of freedom have in the way of plans to destroy our liberty and freedom. It really should catch the attention of some of our United States federal government. We passed a bill today, and I love and respect the push for it, but I need to make further comment about it. This was H.R. 4919. It's a bill. It was supposed to just be, it's just a reauthorization. Well, it's got a program, and people that start these kind of things knowing where they'll end up start with a small amount of money. If you start with just millions, then you can go later on from there. And when you paint it as being simply to help families who have autistic or Alzheimer patients, people with dementia, things that Americans like me, we understand, because we've had family members who, because of organic problems, a very brilliant person can become confused, not know where they are, become lost. But life here in Congress would be so much easier if I simply would not read the bills. But this bill creates a program, a federal tracking program, and it starts with Alzheimer's patients, autism patients, people with those disabilities. But it also includes, according to the bill, developmental disabilities, and that's broad enough that you can start including all kinds of things now that the law has been passed. My understanding, I was told that in the Senate, it was likewise through. Somebody went on the Senate floor when other senators weren't there, maybe two people or so, and said, I ask unanimous consent that this bill be passed. Hearing no objection, so ordered. Not much of a vote. We didn't even have a hearing in committee. We didn't, where we bring witnesses, talk to experts, talk to people involved, see what the problem is, see if the cure is worse than the problem. And we didn't have that. We didn't have constitutional experts talk about the indications for our future freedom. Instead, we got this bill, and I'm grateful the proponents tried to fix things, but as I read through it, the fixes didn't really fix things. This program that's supposed to help because of people with mental health issues, confusion, getting lost, dying. We know these things happen. There is nothing anywhere in the law that prevents a parent from having something that helps that parent track or keep track of their autistic child or child with, according to this bill, developmental disabilities. Nothing. There's nothing that keeps a guardian for using some kind of tracking methodology to keep up with someone who has Alzheimer's. And yes, I know it's a serious issue. But why wasn't this left then to the Department of Health and Human Services if it's really just a mental health issue? And the answer is it was left to the Attorney General, to the Department of Justice, because truth is, if it needs to expand, that's where they want it to expand. We were assured that this is voluntary, but once you have a program in place, it's very easy for someone to file a petition and ask a judge, such as I once was back in Texas, here's the indications. We need an order for the good of this person, safety of the public, so that this person can be tracked. And it's not just danger to themselves. The bill talks about or caused by the patient, injury that's caused by the patient or could be. And we know from Department of Homeland Security that many in the Department of Homeland Security think the biggest threat for hate crimes, for destruction and death in America are from people who are veterans. that may like the idea of the Second Amendment allowing them to keep guns. There are people who believe the Constitution should be literally followed, and the words that the Constitution actually says should be followed. I mean, the founders of this country would, of course, if they were around today, would be at the top of this administration's no-fly list because they wanted liberty above all. They wanted freedom. They did not want a government that interceded into their own personal, private decisions and lives. But now we have this bill. The Attorney General will tell us what the rules are because the bill says he or she will. And the Attorney General will set up the best practices. And I know that there's language added that, oh, no, the parent or guardian, they have to voluntarily use this program. It's not forced. The grants are not for anyone except voluntary, but I can guarantee you the program will ultimately be used to involuntarily place tracking information on people. And then, despite some of my friends in Congress saying this is really not a danger, it's nothing to worry about, I get back to the office and my staff hands me an article regarding Japan, and lo and behold, it's from Yahoo News. Japan tags dementia sufferers with barcodes, and the article goes on to point out that in Japan, where until after World War II and the surrender in 1945, Japan had a history of submitting to whatever the emperor, the totalitarian leader, dictated. Well, now in Japan, they've come up with the best way of tracking people. It's by putting barcodes on fingers. All you need is a barcode on one finger, a barcode on one toe, and then the Japanese government will be able to accurately and adequately track people they're concerned about. So I don't think anybody needs to be worried about the government having this Orwellian program unless perhaps they're Christian, because the Civil Rights Commission thinks that people who talk about religious freedom, religious liberty, Christians that use words like evangelical, that those are the biggest threat perhaps for hate in America because of the ignorance in this administration. And I mean, there's nothing against them personally. It's just all of us are ignorant in some areas. But apparently in this administration, there's widespread ignorance over the fact that Christianity is the religion based on love. That God so loved the world he would send his son, and that his son would so love the world he would lay down his life for his friends, which he, Jesus, said was the greatest love. And true Christians follow the teachings of Jesus, just as most Muslims try to do, to follow the teachings of Jesus. But anyway, if you're a Christian, or you believe the Constitution should be literally followed, or you believe that you should have a right to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment, or you believe the 10th Amendment means what it says, that any power not specifically enumerated for the federal government is reserved to the states and people. Anybody that believes those kind of things is really a threat, according to some in this administration and some in what has become more of a permanent government. Administrations come and go, but we've got liberals that are so tolerant they want to take away the rights of anybody with whom they disagree. The blacklist experts, they talk about blacklists of the 50s, and they go beyond anything that the 50s may have had in store for those who wanted to bring down the United States government. So anyway, there just was not enough attention paid to this bill, and my heart, and I'm not kidding, I'm not being sarcastic, that there were some that were pushing for this bill that have some of the biggest hearts, want to do more to help people. And I'm afraid because of the bill's passage today, and I'm sure the president will sign it into law, we get to track people we're concerned about in America. Maybe we'll use a barcode. If we can have the Attorney General, in his opinion, find that a subcutaneous chip implant is non-invasive, then we could do that. But maybe the barcode would be better than a chip. But anyway, we've passed the program, and someday I am very afraid for my dear friends that push this bill, that history will not so much remember the wonderful things they have fought for in this life, the great moral issues they have stood for, but one day they'll be remembered as the ones who quietly pushed this bill through that allowed a federal government to begin tracking for the first time students, or not students, but young people, whether they're students or not, people with disabilities, and I'm sure we'll be seeing the Attorney General add definitions, since it's up to her, or someday him perhaps, to determine what really is developmental disability. So those things are coming. People need to be aware of them. Perhaps someday we'll have a Congress, before it's too late, that will back up and say, wait a minute, we are not going to be funding with federal taxpayer dollars a track system for American citizens. I had some colleagues say, well, I could have voted for it if it was only people who were known terrorists, but we don't want to track known terrorists. This bill would be considered an abomination if we tried to put a barcode or a chip into a known terrorist in the United States. No, this needs to be reserved for people who get confused, and so it goes. And in the words of Billy Joel, so it goes, and you're the only one who knows. So, also, being as how this week included the 75th anniversary of the day of infamy, when right at that level, the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, said, actually 75 years ago today, he said, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a day which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. He went on, it's about a page-and-a-half speech, double-spaced, and he concludes by saying, with confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounded determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph. So help us, God. And it is interesting, often referred to God. He is the only president, American president, of which I'm aware, who went on national radio or TV, but he went on radio, it's what they had at the time, on D-Day, when thousands of American troops were landing in France on the beaches, thousands were being killed, and he led the nation in a Christian prayer on national radio. Why? Because he was a true leader of the United States. He knew our nation was in great trouble, and so the natural thing to do was lead the nation in prayer. if we go back to the man who's called the father of the Constitution, as I understand it, the federal government mandates a test to be taught in order for people to get a little bit of the money that they send from their states to the Washington, D.C., to the Department of Education. Department of Education, you do what they tell you, they'll send you a little bit back of your own money. So they don't require that the statements of our constitutional founders be learned. My understanding, the biggest thing the current folks want to be taught and learned about World War II is not that America was attacked, there was a day of infamy, and that America was fighting and losing lives around the world, not as much for America, but for liberty, for freedom, for that there would be places where people could live and have opportunity and make their own decisions without the forces of radical Islam, which had joined forces with the Nazis and with the emperor in Japan. But if you go back to James Madison, he said, "We staked the whole future of American civilization not on the power of government, far from it. We have staked the future of all of our political institutions upon the capacity of mankind for self-government, upon the capacity of each and all of us to govern ourselves, to control ourselves, to sustain ourselves according to the Ten Commandments." That is rather important. And that's why if you go through the writings, pronouncements, the proclamations, the laws of the United States for the first 150 years or so, we finally got the Constitution to a place where people understood you can't have slavery legally exist under a Constitution that grants freedom. And thank God they finally got past the ridiculous decision in Dred Scott, and we got past the Civil War. And in 1890, there was a case that the Supreme Court sat in on, 131 U.S., page 1, 1890. The Supreme Court said this: "It is contrary to the spirit of Christianity, civilization, which Christianity has produced in the Western world." 2 years later, in the case of the United States versus the Church of the Holy Trinity, the Supreme Court went on for pages talking about the evidence of Christianity in America, not so that Christianity would be forced or imposed on anyone, but as Madison understood, and as Adams understood, and as Washington understood, you could not maintain self-government, a democratic republic where we will elect representatives as our servants. You can't maintain that if it is not a religious and a moral people. And that cannot be a majority of religious and moral people who believe that the Constitution must totally be subjugated to a particular law, whether that be Sharia or others. So in the Declaration of Independence, this is the Supreme Court citing this in their 1892 decision, the Declaration of Independence recognizes the presence of the divine in human affairs in these words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, capital C, with certain inalienable rights, appealing to the Supreme Judge in capitalized letters, of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, and for the support of this declaration, with firm reliance on the protection of providence, divine providence capitalized, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. When I saw a copy of the original Treaty of Paris, 1783, where we forced England to swear under something so important that they would not want to break the oath, what do you come up with to get Great Britain, the most powerful country in the world, most powerful navy and army, what do you get them to swear under that they would not willingly be wanting to break that oath? The big words, huge letters starting the treaty that recognized our independence for the first time, starts out in the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity. That's Father, Son, Holy Ghost. The opinion goes on and cites so many examples of Christianity in America. And they say we are a Christian people, and the morality of the country is deeply engrafted upon Christianity and not upon the doctrines of worship of those impostors. It goes on and says, after much more recitations, these and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declaration to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation. We find everywhere a clear recognition of the same truth. The happiness of a people and the good order and preservation of civil government essentially depend upon piety, religion, and morality. Not that we would ever force Christian beliefs on anyone, but as historically, and as even a Muslim leader, a descendant of Muhammad, told General J. Garner in Iraq when he was inquiring what kind of government should we have. He said it should be based on the teachings of Jesus, because that descendant of Muhammad, that Muslim leader, understood that it's really only if you have a government that is under the teachings of Jesus, where an atheist, a Buddhist, anybody, Hindu, any religion, Islam, any religion can prosper without fear, so long as they do not try to undo the Constitution of the United States. So Franklin Roosevelt, so endeared to liberals in this nation, December 24th, 1933, said, "This year marks a greater national understanding of the significance in our modern lives of the teaching of Him," capitalized Him, "with whose birth we celebrate. To more and more of us, the words, 'Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself,' have taken on a meaning that is showing itself and proving itself in our purposes in daily lives. May the practice of that high ideal grow in us all in the year to come. I give you and send you one and all, old and young, a Merry Christmas and a truly Happy New Year. And so for now and for always, God bless us, everyone." Another example, Franklin Roosevelt, December 21st, 2 short weeks after at Pearl Harbor. I won't read the whole thing, but it's deeply moving. And he finishes by saying, "Our strongest weapon in this war is that conviction of the dignity and brotherhood of man, which Christmas Day signifies. Against enemies who preach the principles of hate and practice them, we set our faith in human love and in God's care for us and all men everywhere." He said, our strength as the strength of all men everywhere is of greater avail as God upholds us. In 1942, on Christmas Eve, he finished by saying, it is significant that tomorrow, Christmas Day, our plants and factories will be stilled. That is not true of the other holidays we have long been accustomed to celebrate. On all other holidays, work goes on, gladly for the winning of the war. So Christmas becomes the only holiday in all the year. I like to think this is so because Christmas is a holy day. John F. Kennedy, December 17th, said these words, and I won't read the whole thing, but the conclusion, 1962. This has been a year of peril, with the peace, where the peace has been sorely threatened. But it's been a year when peril was faced and when reason ruled. As a result, we may talk at this Christmas just a little bit more confidently of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And as a result, the hopes of the American people are perhaps a little higher. We have much yet to do. We still need to ask that God bless everyone. And then last for today, before we adjourn for Christmas, Ronald Reagan, December 19, 1988, he concluded his Christmas address as saying, our compassion and concern this Christmas and all year long will mean much to the hospitalized, the homeless, the convalescent, the orphaned, and will surely lead us on our way to the joy and peace of Bethlehem and the Christ child who bids us come. For it's only in finding and living the eternal meaning of the Nativity that we can be truly happy, truly at peace, truly home. I conclude, Mr. Speaker, as Ronald Reagan did. Merry Christmas. God bless you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, pursuant to Section 233E1 of the Social Security